Zion, Teitzei Torah, Adonai, Me'Yerushalayim, Baruch Shenatan, Torah, Torah, Baruch Shenatan, Torah, Torah, Namo Yisrael, V'Kedushato.
Got two questions for you.
Yes,
So,
and then no, and then yes.
wait, that's three. So
No,
the first
no,
one.
that's
So,
not.
so for the Baruch Hu, when she does the Baruch Hu,
Yeah.
can she do it the way you do it Friday night with the melody?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was gonna do an aliyah otherwise, so
Otherwise, she goes right into the
Yeah.
singing and thinking like it's an aliyah. Okay, cool. The other question I have for you is, at this point in time, when we're going into the Bay Be'anal Rachis, does she then come
Bay-
over with you
Be'anal
for that,
Rachis.
and then follow you while you're carrying the Torah or not?
No, she's gonna carry the Torah.
No, you said for her bat mitzvah she will.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, my mistake. This Shabbat.
Oh, yeah, this Shabbat she can come with you while I carry it, yeah.
She'll follow you,
Yes.
okay.
because if I carried it, wouldn't it be like my actual bat mitzvah?
No, but it's the,
No,
it's the,
it's just kind of, I think it's really
It's an
cool,
honor.
special.
Yes,
that
special.
The first time you really carry the Torah in the congregation is on your bat mitzvah. I think
Yeah.
that makes it really super special.
it is, it's very nice. That's it. Is something happening here?
Rabbi has a
Is this your presentation?
no. Rabbi has a Hebrew school thingy. That's like a 9 things I bet you didn't know for Hanukkah.
Okay,
What time is it? 11.
Oh, it's 5 to 11, okay, let's go to Micah's office.
Wait, doesn't this end at 11?
We said we can do it. Do you want to listen to this? You can. Let's go.
I wanted to go have a break with my friends. Okay. Oh.
Let's go to Micah's office first, we have your stuff.
I wanted to sing Billie Eilish.
this microphone that's doing that. I don't know why. It's not anymore. There we go. Or is it this microphone? It might have been you because you saw the cord. I think it's that. Okay. Cool deal. All right. All right. We're going to do this. Elena, are we live? I don't see the red button up there. So, we're on this over here. Cool. And are we trained on this guy right here from up there? I hope so. Okay, fantastic. Hello, people who are online with us. Thank you for being with us today. And thank you for you all being here today. It is the next session. And by the way, I know there's not a lot of people in the microphone, but if I don't use the microphone, the people who are online with us, they can't hear anything. So that's why I'm using the microphone. But welcome to another session of They Never Taught Me That in Hebrew School. And today we are going to learn 9 things that you might not know about Hanukkah. If you were here with me for the Hanukkah program on Thursday night, this program is called 8 Things You Might Know and 1 Thing That You Better Know because I taught it to you on Thursday night about Hanukkah. That's the other alternative name of the program here. So before we get started, we're going to say a little blessing for studying. And that blessing is right here. So if you all would join with me, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who makes us holy with your mitzvot and commands us to engage in the words of Torah. So, how many of you think you know? Well, first of all, Dan, you have a puzzled look on your face because? Is Hanukkah even in the Torah? No, it is not. Is Hanukkah in the Tanakh? No, it's not. Maybe that's a thing you don't know, but it's not on my list of 9 things you might not know. But you might not know that. Hanukkah is not in the Torah. It is not in the Tanakh. It's not in the Hebrew Bible at all. We don't hear anything about Hanukkah in Jewish literature until we get to the Talmud. And we'll get to that in just a little bit. So why would we say a blessing that says to engage in the words of Torah? Because we can use Torah meaning the 5 books of Moses, or we can use Torah as meaning all of Jewish learning. Torah as a word for just Jewish learning. So we're engaging ourselves in words of Torah, meaning anything Jewish that we study together as a Jewish community. So that's why we would say this blessing. How many of you think you know a lot about Hanukkah? How many of you think you know some stuff about Hanukkah? How many of you think I know nothing about Hanukkah? At the end of this, you might think that. I don't know. We'll find out. But we're going to cover some religious stuff. We're going to cover some pop culture stuff. And believe me, these are not the only 9 things about Hanukkah that there are to know. But there are some things here that you think you might know about Hanukkah that you might not know. So, we eat latkes because Judah and his brothers, when they went to fight the Maccabees, fried potatoes in oil and ate them, right? We eat latkes because there was oil in the temple, etc., etc. So let's talk about latkes. The original latkes were made from cheese. If you were with me on Thursday night, this is one of the things that you already know because we talked about it on Thursday night. Latkes were made from cheese. And why were latkes made from cheese? Because of the story of Judith, right? I know many people think that Judah Maccabee was the hero of the Hanukkah story. But I would like to tell all the girls and all the women in the room that the hero of Hanukkah was a woman by the name of Judith, and the story I'm going to tell you is not true. So here we go. Ready? Here's a very famous painting right now by a painter by the name of Botticelli. That painting hangs in a museum in Spain these days. You can go check it out. But you'll notice that Judith right here, you notice what she's carrying in the bucket up there? No, take a closer look. That's a guy's head. So, here's the story of Judith. Not any Judith who might happen to be in the room right now. but the story of Judith. This story is a story that was acquired from another time. This story may be true. Can we put those away for right now? Thank you. All right, this story might be somewhat sort of maybe true from a completely different period of time and was acquired as a Hanukkah story a long time ago, like close to 2,000 years ago. The story is this, that the Maccabees were losing. By the way, we're going to count our 9 things. We're beginning with the shamash right here. That's 1. You'll see when we get to 2, we'll have a shamash and 1 candle right there. But thing number 1 that you might not know is this story. Judith saw that the Maccabees were losing. Who was Judith? Judith was a very beautiful woman. Can you tell from Botticelli's painting over here? She's a very beautiful woman. She was also a very wise woman, and she saw that the Maccabees were losing all of the battles. And she thought, I have an idea. And she went to the general of the Seleucid Greeks who we were fighting against during this war, during the Maccabean revolt, from the year 167 to 160 or 159 BCE. And she saw that they were losing all of the battles. And she said, I have an idea. The general in charge of the Assyrian Greeks, or the Seleucid Greeks, we call them by different names, he's a very wise man. And as long as he's leading the troops, the Maccabees will continue to lose. So she went to Holofernes, that was his name, Holofernes, or Holofernes. In Hebrew, Holofernos. In Greek, Holofernes, one difference of one vowel. But she went to Holofernes, and being a very beautiful woman, she seduced him. She said, hey, why don't we go back to your place? We'll have dinner, and then we'll see how things go. And she fed him cheese, and of course, when you eat cheese, cheese is salty, and so you're thirsty. So you want to do what? Drink. So she gave him wine. And then she gave him more cheese, and he was thirsty, so she gave him more wine, until he got so drunk that he passed out. Small children might want to cover their ears for the next part of this story. And then she took a knife, and she chopped off his head. And she brought his head to Judah and the rest of the Maccabees and said, I don't think this guy is going to give you any trouble anymore. And the next day, the Maccabees won their first battle. The story I told you is absolutely not true. Now, it might have been true. We think maybe there was a similar story that actually may have happened during the time of the Babylonian Empire. The details are not exactly what I told you, but we think there was some sort of similar thing that actually did happen, that there was a Jewish woman who killed a Babylonian general. We don't know that she chopped his head off, but we think that she did kill him, and it helped with a Jewish rebellion against the Babylonian Empire. We actually think that that's a true story. But somehow, nearly 2,000 years ago, we acquired this story into the Hanukkah legend. And so Judith becomes the hero of Hanukkah instead of maybe Judah and the rest of the Maccabees, because without her, this never would have happened. So to honor Judith, we make latkes out of, you can see the oozing cheese right there. We make latkes out of cheese. So why did we move from cheese latkes to potato latkes? And the reason is this, because in the early 1800s, if you lived in Poland or Russia or Ukraine or the eastern parts of Europe, cheese became very expensive. And there were cheaper things to eat than cheese. There was some sort of plague that happened among the crops, and all of the crops in Eastern Europe died over these couple of years, except for 2 crops that apparently were very resilient: potatoes and onions. And so potatoes and onions were cheap, cheese was expensive, so they started making the latkes out of potatoes and onions because you could fry that instead of the expensive cheese. Latkes actually originate from cheese bread, kind of cheesy dough pancakes in Italy, most likely, is where we think they come from, probably around somewhere between the 13th to 15th century. We have stories of like Maccabee children eating latkes and stuff. No, they didn't eat latkes. We don't know what they ate, but it wasn't latkes. And they weren't frying them in oil because they just weren't doing that. And by the way, when we started frying the latkes of potatoes and onions, we didn't fry them in oil. What do we fry them in? Schmaltz, chicken fat, right? Because there's not enough calories in potatoes and onions fried in olive oil or vegetable. There's not enough calories. So to up the calorie count, let's fry it in chicken fat, right? To get more calories, because that's what we do. And the other thing is, like, we wouldn't have done the cheese ones in schmaltz because, right, we don't mix milk and meat. So, but then we went to oil. But schmaltz was cheaper because they ate a chicken, so they had it, and they didn't have to go make or buy any kind of oil. So latkes, not potatoes, not onions, cheese. That's the origins of the latke because of the story of Judith. Roseanne. So Roseanne wants to know why they do sufganiyot in Israel. So clearly, Roseanne has been looking at my slides. Because that's slide number 2. Here's the second thing you might not know. Israelis eat over 17.5 million jelly donuts, or sufganiyot, each Hanukkah. Let me do the math for you. That's 2.5 jelly donuts per Jew in Israel during the 8 days of Hanukkah. And that means for every person who does not eat a jelly donut, like the little 2-day-old baby, that means someone has to eat 5 jelly donuts to make up for the person who didn't eat their 2.5 jelly donuts. So why jelly donuts in Israel instead of latkes? People do eat latkes in Israel. But more so, they eat sufganiyot, or jelly donuts. Why? Because the principle is not about making a latke, which, by the way, is Yiddish. What's the Hebrew word for latke? Anybody know? Levivah. And levivah means, anybody know what levivah? First of all, do you know what latke actually means? Latke actually means pancake. Pancake. It means the Yiddish word latke actually means pancake. Everybody thinks it means a fried potato pancake. That's not what it means. It just means pancake. And in all likelihood, it comes from, they think there's a old Ukrainian word that's similar to that, and there's also a Greek word that has a part of it in it as well. So levivah means pancake. And so, but levivah actually means a risen pancake, right? And if you make a pancake rise, it becomes a donut, right? It becomes a thick pancake, right? So it's a donut. So this is anything fried in oil becomes a thing that you eat on Hanukkah because of the story of the oil. That's thing number 4. We'll get, I think, or it might be 5, but we'll get to that. But anything fried in oil, which leads my 7th graders to say to me, anything fried in oil. What do you guys want to eat for Hanukkah? Anything fried in oil, what? What is it? Fried chicken. Can you eat fried chicken? That would be really good, actually. Should you eat fried chicken for Hanukkah? It's fried in oil. All right, what else? That's not the answer I thought I was going to get. French fries. French fries and potato chips. That's the one I get from students all the time. If you can eat anything fried in oil to celebrate Hanukkah, my parents need to take me and give me French fries and potato chips every single day of Hanukkah, right, you guys? Absolutely. So you tell your parents that Rabbi Jay never said that. But if you can eat anything fried in oil, French fries, potato chips, fried chicken, anything that you can stick in oil, falafel, right? Anything fried in oil, right? I mean, you can toss anything in the oil. If you go to the county fair, right, they fry everything at the county fair. I went to the county fair a couple of years ago. They fried Coca-Cola. I didn't know you could fry a liquid, but there was a stand there and said, we sell fried Coca-Cola. And I was too scared to try it because I didn't know what that would be. And then there was another stand and they had fried butter. So, Maybe, I don't know. I was too scared to go check it out. It was like, I don't want to go there. But anything fried in oil, and so in Israel, it becomes a risen pancake, right? And why a jelly donut as opposed to another donut? Really, it's about the sweetness of the holiday. How do we add sweetness to the holiday? So you add more sweet, add jelly. And so it's about sweetness, because as if your donut doesn't have enough sugar in it, add some sweetness to the holiday, and there you go. So thing number 2 that you might not know about Hanukkah, every Israeli eats 2.5 donuts every Hanukkah, and some of them have to make up for the ones who don't. 2.5 donuts on average per person. I got 2 quick questions over here. AJ. Did I know that you can fry what? You can probably fry anything. Yeah, I don't know. Yes. Noah. Do you actually have to have frosting on the jelly donut? No. But, this has powdered sugar, right? But I guess it's all about the sweetness of Hanukkah, right? Roseanne. Funnel cake, yeah, anything, all of that, anything fried in oil. So this is where this idea comes from, frying in oil. And in Israel, some people eat latkes, but most people eat jelly donuts. By the way, where's the best place to buy a jelly donut? It's going to be obvious when I tell you. Where's the best place to buy a jelly donut in Israel during Hanukkah? Dunkin' Donuts. There are no Dunkin' Donuts in Israel. It would have made sense. But where would you go? Think about it for a moment. Where would you go in Israel to buy a jelly donut during Hanukkah that would be the obvious place in Israel to go? What do you got? Grocery store. They might have them there, but that wouldn't be the spot. Where would you go? Denny? You go and think about it. Ready? Mel, you got it?
Go to a Jewish temple because they're making them all.
No. I'm going to tell you the answer, and you're going to say, oh, yeah, of course you do. You buy jelly donuts during Hanukkah at a falafel stand. They have oil. They fry stuff. Of course that's where you go. Every falafel stand in Israel sells jelly donuts during Hanukkah because they have vats of oil. So you can also go to a bakery as well to get them, but every falafel stand in Israel is frying them. Another thing that you associate with Hanukkah that you may not know about and you think you know about, well, let me tell you, you don't really know, because there's a thing called a dreidel. The dreidel game, the story you know of the dreidel game is not true. The dreidel game is based on a German version of teetotum, which is an old English gambling game played in Irish pubs. You spin the top and you bet some money while you're drinking beer in Ireland. That's what this is called. So the deal is this: the dreidel was invented in the late 18th century. The dreidel, so the story we know about the dreidel is this. Let me tell you the story that you might know about the dreidel that some of our adults might have learned when you were in religious school. You learned that the Maccabees were not allowed to study Torah. And they went into caves to hide from the Seleucid Greeks. And when the Greek soldiers would come by, they would take spinning tops and spin them as if they were playing a game and not studying Torah to fake out the Greeks. As you can see on here, that story was written in 1890 by Rabbi Abraham Eliezer Hershevitz in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That's the first record we have of that story. In his book that he wrote in 1890, that he published in 1890, we do not have this story anywhere in any Jewish writing, anywhere, about the Maccabee children playing little spinning top games in a cave. That story does not exist in any Jewish writing until this rabbi in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in America, which I think is not in Israel. He wrote this story in his book. Until that, we do not have this story. And the oral tradition. The oral tradition did not come for almost 2,000 years from the Maccabees and not get written down. That's not possible. Oral tradition is great, but there's no way that got passed down for 2,000 years before one person wrote it down. No rabbi in history until 1890 wrote down this story. Yes, Danny.
Why can't we believe that if we can believe that a carrot tree grew in a cave and fed people?
You can, if you want to believe that kids played dreidel in a cave, you are welcome to believe that. But what we know is that in the German game, which they took the letters from the Irish game, the letters actually originally in German, nicht, ganz, halb, and schicht. Nothing, all, half, and put. You get nothing, right? The rules of the game. The letters did not stand for Nes Gadol Haya Sham. A great miracle happened there. We made that up in the 18th century because they said we're going to take the German letters and write the German letters in Hebrew, the German letters for the words of the German game, which was a gambling game in the bar, which is based on the gambling game in the Irish bar. We're going to take the letters and put them into Hebrew letters, and now we have these Hebrew letters, so we better come up with something. And somebody, some smart guy said, I got, hey nun gimel shin, shin nun hey gimel, wait, I got nun gimel hey shin, nes gadol haya sham. A great miracle happened there. Perfect. The letters fit into the saying that I said. Because think about it, you can come up with all the words in the dictionary that start with these 4 letters. You can come up with something that has to do with Hanukkah, and they created that. Rigel.
But how did they make the connection from Irish gambling to Hanukkah? Like who's like, oh, now all the kids can play this on Hanukkah?
That's a great question. How did they go from Irish gambling to kids playing this on Hanukkah? So here's what happened. This was an Irish drinking game. Then it became a British drinking game. And then it became a German drinking game. And then all of a sudden, I guess dads who were drinking at the bar in Germany brought it home. And at Christmas time in Germany, kids would play this gambling game. And they would play for little chocolate coins. Where have I heard that before? Yeah, little chocolate coins made from German chocolate makers. And they would play for little gold-covered chocolate coins from German candy stores. And then apparently some Jewish kids who were friends with the Christian kids started playing this game. And then their parents said, oh, we can play this game. Wait, what if we put Hebrew letters on our thing? And that's how it wound up becoming part of Hanukkah in the 1800s. And that is the real story of where the dreidel came from. Not this thing about little kids played tops to hide from the Greeks, that they were learning Torah. That never happened. This rabbi in Pittsburgh made up that story, and now all of us think that that's really true. Jenny. My guess is yes. I don't know the answer to that being yes, but it sure seems to make sense that it does, right? Doesn't it? It sure seems that where's the word teetotaler come from? It probably comes from they're drinking while they're doing this betting game. I didn't look up the history of that, but it sure makes sense that that's where that there would be a connection to that. Yeah, absolutely. So here we go. This is the real story of the dreidel. Well, if there's a real story to the dreidel, maybe there's a real story to the... Say that louder. If that's the true story of the dreidel, maybe there's a true story to the miracle of the oil, because the oil story was created more than 600 years after the Maccabean revolt. Here's what we know. In the story of the second book of Maccabees, which was written down in Greek somewhere between the year 150 and 100 BCE, which tells the story of the battle of the Maccabees against the Sadducee Greeks, there is no story about a miracle of oil. There is a story about a group of Maccabees defeating the Greek army. There is no oil story. In the first book of Maccabees, which is written later than the second book of Maccabees, I know that sounds confusing, but the second book of Maccabees was written before the first book of Maccabees. They just labeled them that way. Don't ask me why. That's just what happened. The first book of Maccabees written between the year 165 BCE. Remember, the revolt of the Maccabees is 167 to 160 BCE. So the second book of Maccabees written somewhere between 10 and 60 years after the Maccabean revolt. The first book of Maccabees written maybe as much as almost 100 years after the Maccabean revolt. All right? Now, the first book of Maccabees written in Hebrew originally, second book of Maccabees written in Greek originally, translated into Hebrew, and then translated into Latin. And then, so by the way, first and second Maccabees, not in the Jewish Bible. They are in the Christian Bible for about half of the Christian world, and not in the Christian Bible for the other half of the Christian world. Some Christians have it in their Bible, some don't. First Maccabees, the story of the war. Second Maccabees, the story of the war from a more religious perspective. Third Maccabees, there is a third book of Maccabees. It's about a revolt of a group of slaves against Egypt about 200 years before the Maccabean revolt in Israel, and has nothing at all to do with the Maccabees. But they said, this is about a revolt, some people against the government. The Maccabees did that, we'll call it Maccabees 3. Maccabees 4, there is a Maccabees 4. Maccabees 4 is a book of philosophical concepts that have nothing to do with the revolt or the Maccabees. Maccabees 5 and 6, commentary on Maccabees 4. Maccabees 5 and 6, not in any Christian Bible. Maccabees 1 and 2 in about half of Christian Bibles for half the Christian world. Not Maccabees 3 and 4, about 25% of the Christian world have that in their Bible, and some, the other 75% don't. We read the first and second book of Maccabees, Jews, as history books to learn the story of Hanukkah, not as religious books. First book of Maccabees, second book of Maccabees, right here. 150 to 100 BCE, no oil story. First book of Maccabees, 100 to 65 BCE is when it was written. Religious story, no oil story. The Jewish War, written by Josephus Flavius, a Jewish general captured by the Roman Empire, and then wrote about Jewish history, right there we go, and wrote about Jewish history for the Roman Empire. And in his book, The Jewish War, which covers very extensively the Maccabean Revolt, finished being writing right around the year 75 CE, all right? So we're about 250 years or so after the Maccabees. No oil story. The Jerusalem Talmud. Here we are, the Jerusalem Talmud. 350 to 400 CE. We are now more than 550 years past the revolt of the Maccabees. The Jerusalem Talmud, when it discusses Hanukkah, no oil story. And then suddenly, in the Babylonian Talmud, which is finished around the year 500 CE, all of a sudden appears an oil story. What's the deal? The deal is this. By the time the Babylonian Talmud was about to be finished, the rabbis realized that the people were celebrating Hanukkah as a nationalistic military holiday and not as a religious holiday. And it upset the rabbis. Because in the Talmud, what does it say about Hanukkah? Where in the Talmud does Hanukkah appear? Of course, it makes sense that it's in a tractate of the Talmud called Shabbat. What? Shabbat, yeah. It's in the tractate called Shabbat. What's that? Oh, we did. We learned that on Thursday night too. It's in the tractate of Talmud called Shabbat. Why? The rabbis are talking about Shabbat candles. And as rabbis will do, not me, but all other rabbis, sometimes rabbis go out on tangents about stuff. I never do that, but some rabbis do. And these rabbis go on a tangent in the Talmud, and they say, since we're talking about Shabbat candles and the rules of Shabbat candles, let's talk about the rules of Hanukkah candles. And then they do not tell the story of Hanukkah. They just assume that everybody knows the story of Hanukkah. So clearly it must have been a popular holiday that everybody knew, because they discuss, no, they don't mention the Maccabees, they don't mention the temple, they don't mention oil in the Jerusalem Talmud, nothing. They just talk about what are the rules for lighting the Hanukkah candles. That's all they talk about. What are the rules for lighting the Hanukkah candles? Judy.
So what if the story
You guys?
of Maccabees wasn't a nationalistic holiday? What did the rabbis say made it a religious holiday?
Because in the first book of, or second book of Maccabees, right, this one here, the second book of Maccabees, it tells it from a more religious perspective, that God is a piece of the story. The Maccabees are inspired by God. This is a religious war for them. Whereas First Maccabees is more of a history book, and the people seem to be focusing on the first Maccabee story, not the second Maccabee story, and the rabbis want to refocus their perspective. So after the rabbis who are in Babylonia, which is the main Jewish community at the time, these guys here want to refocus everybody away from a nationalistic story, and they want it to be that God made this happen. So how do you do that? It's a miracle. We're going to talk in a little bit of time about what the real miracle of Hanukkah is. Am I disturbing you guys? Okay, thanks. So, they said this, Hanukkah is a miracle. Again, we'll talk about what the real miracle of Hanukkah is in a couple of minutes here. But if we want to focus people on a miracle, especially people who are focused on another idea, we need a miracle story. If I tell you this philosophical reason, which I'll tell you in a little bit, of what the miracle of Hanukkah is, most people are going to go, eh. But if I give you a miracle story, one cruse of oil that was supposed to last for 1 day lasted for 8 days, and it was a miracle, now I have a real miracle story. And it doesn't matter that it's not a true story, that we took it actually from another book that had the same miracle in Egypt from about 500 years earlier, which is where we got the miracle of oil story from. Because the idea is not to make us believe that the miracle of oil story is the real story. It's to give us a reason to think that Hanukkah is a miracle. And if I need a make-believe story to get me in the mindset that there's a miracle, the miracle of oil story serves a purpose. It doesn't matter that it's a pretend story. We can use pretend stories to teach lessons, right? They're called fables. We use fables all the time to teach moral lessons. So it doesn't bother me, I hope it doesn't bother you, that the oil story didn't happen with the Maccabees. We made it up in the Talmud. But we used it, we didn't make it up just because let's make up something silly. We took it from another story and used it to use it as a fable to get us to understand that there was a miracle here, and this oil story helps us get there. So why is Hanukkah 8 days if the oil didn't last for 8 days? There's a few reasons. The real reason likely is one of these two. There's a few other midrash reasons. The real reason is either they had a late celebration of Sukkot and Shmini Atzeret, that's 8 days, those two together, in the temple when they rededicated, because it was the most recent holiday they missed. The temple had been closed for 3 years, and so they missed all the holidays for 3 years, but that was the most recent one. Or we know that when Solomon dedicated the first temple, it tells us that there was an 8-day dedication festival. One of those reasons is probably the real reason why Hanukkah is 8 days long. Denny, you have a question?
Isn't there still an issue with Hanukkah being associated as a military holiday? I thought I heard that in Israel it's a real issue.
It's a huge issue in Israel. That Hanukkah has become a very militaristic holiday. If you go to most schools, the kids decorate for Hanukkah not with menorahs, I mean they do have menorahs, not with dreidels, I mean they do have dreidels, but the primary decorations in a lot of elementary and middle schools in Israel are Israeli fighter planes, scenes from Israeli wars, because the Maccabees won the war because they were the greatest army, and our army, the Israeli army, is the greatest army. And so it's become a very militaristic, nationalistic holiday in Israel. And the rabbis of today in Israel have this, you know what, can you guys move apart from each other? Can we move apart from each other? Okay. Thank you. So, the rabbis in Israel have the same problem that these rabbis in the Babylonian Talmud had right here, that the people are focusing more on the military victory than they are on the religious aspect of the holiday, and it upsets the rabbis in Israel today. So yeah, this problem that was an ancient problem, we're revisiting it now. Because, no, God wasn't part of this. The mighty IDF. They actually have pictures, I've seen pictures in Israeli schools, of Judah Maccabee with an Israeli Defense Forces patch right here, right next to his rank as general. Right, he's got the epaulets of general and then IDF right there, because Judah Maccabee, I guess, had like on his robe, way back then, you know, had IDF and probably carried an Israeli flag or something, I don't know. But so, speaking of Israeli flags, Speaking of Israeli flags that Judah Maccabee carried, of course, the Israeli flag is what color? What color is the Israeli flag? Blue and white. What are the colors of Hanukkah? Blue and white. Isn't that weird? Why is Hanukkah blue and white? But it was blue and white before the state of Israel. No, the reason that blue and white is the colors of Hanukkah on all the Hanukkah stuff you buy in the store and see online is because, there we go, Ludwig August Frankl, who was born in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, wrote a poem called Judah's Colors. And in the poem it says, blue and white are the colors of Judah, white is the radiance of the priesthood, and blue the splendor of the firmament. Not my tallis right here because mine has black and gold in it, but a lot of tallises have blue, right? They're blue and white. And why is the Israeli flag blue and white with a stripe? To look like the stripes of a talit, right? And why did the Israeli flag and why talit blue and white? Well, the blue is from Techelet, right? The third paragraph of the Shema that we chant, right? Vayomer Adonai el Moshe lemor daber el bnei Yisrael v'amarta alehem. And God spoke to Moses, and Moses said to the people, Va'asu lahem tzitzit, and you will make fringes al kanfei bigdehem, on the corners of the fringes. Va'asu lahem al kanfei tehem patil techelet, and on the corner there'll be a fringe of blue, and hence we get blue in here. And so this poem became a very well-known poem all over the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It became a very well-known poem all over Europe. And when Jewish things happened, because this was the first Jewish-oriented poem to become popular, and so anything Jewish in Europe in the mid-1800s, all of a sudden, anything Jewish was blue and white, because this was the first pop culture poem that dealt with anything Jewish in the 1800s in Europe. And all of a sudden, everything was blue and white. So why do you buy blue and white decorations? Because that's what they sell at Party City and everywhere else. Ever since this poem, it's become blue and white, and then blue and white become the color of the Israeli flag. And blue and white seems to just become associated with Judaism, but it really took off. It wasn't a thing until Ludwig August Frankl wrote this poem about blue and white, based upon the tallis that he saw his father wear in the synagogue. And blue and white suddenly, because of the popularity of this poem, became a big thing. Everything Jewish in Europe and then coming over to America was blue and white, because the poem was eventually translated into English, and apparently in the 1800s, because it was popular in English-speaking parts of Europe, became popular in America too, and there you go. And Party City in 1864 started selling blue and white. But people started making blue and white stuff, and then when companies started making Hanukkah stuff, all of a sudden, things are blue and white. There are some companies that make multicolored Hanukkah candles, but how many times have you seen blue and white Hanukkah candles? Blue and white decorations. Everything's blue and white. Jews own blue and white. Christians own green and purple, or green and red, and Prince owns purple, right? So there we go. So, and the only one who really has it right is Prince, because Prince definitely owns purple, as far as I'm concerned. Like, why do we only get blue and white? Why can't we have orange and purple and green and red and yellow and all the other colors? No. Jews get blue and white. Christians get green and red. I'm not sure we're relegating Muslims and Hindus and Buddhists to their own colors, but apparently we own colors, and that's it. So, anything green and red means Christmas, and anything blue and white means Hanukkah. I don't really understand why that's the deal, but that's the deal. Blue and white, because of Ludwig August Frankl's poem, are the Jewish colors, because one guy wrote a poem about his father's tallis, and it became popular. Isn't that kind of a weird thing? Like, as I was doing some research for this, I just thought, and I found multiple articles about this guy and these colors, and related to Hanukkah. I just thought, that blew my mind that this was actually a thing. What else blows my mind is this, and I just told my 7th and 6th graders this a little while ago. Hanukkah can start on 6 out of the 7 days. We have a 19-year calendar cycle in the Jewish world. And Hanukkah can start, the first night of Hanukkah, on 6 of the 7 days of the week. In the 19-year cycle, there is one day of the week that Hanukkah never starts on. 7th graders and 6th graders, don't say anything yet. We're going to see if the rest of these people know. The one day of the week that Hanukkah cannot start is Friday night. That's a great guess. It's not right, but that's a great guess. It would make sense, right? It doesn't start. No, it's Tuesday. Hanukkah will never start on a Tuesday night. And the reason is there's nothing religious about it. It's about the math of the lunar calendar and the 19-year cycle of how the days of the week fit together. And the math just works out that the 25th of Kislev never comes on a Tuesday in the 19-year cycle. Nothing religious, nothing spiritual. It's just all about the weird math of a 19-year calendar cycle. That's it. Never happens on a Tuesday. But what we do know in our lifetime, this will change after we're all dead. After you guys here, after your great grandchildren die, this next slide is probably not going to be true anymore. But not until then. For everybody in this room, and for the next about 7 or 8 generations, this is absolutely true for all of us now. And that is that Hanukkah will always start between November 27th at the very earliest date. The first night, December 26th, is the latest the first date will ever be. Hanukkah will always be between these two dates. The first night of Hanukkah, the earliest, is November 27th, and the latest is December 26th. In about 200 years, it's going to shift, and it's going to be November 28th and December 27th. But it's going to be at least 400 years before that shift happens. So if any of you hang out for 400 more years, you'll know that it's going to change. In 2013, none of you guys were alive then, were you? 2013? Were you guys born then? Raise your hand if you were born then. You guys were all alive then. About half of you? Cool. Some of you were born. If you were born in 2013, raise your hand. 2012. 2011? Oh, cool. We got some. Okay, cool. So you don't remember this, but 2013, the rest of us remember Thanksgiving, right? The first day of Hanukkah was Thanksgiving. So the night before era of Thanksgiving, when we lit the first candle, that was the night before Thanksgiving, and then the whole day of Thanksgiving, that was the first day of Hanukkah. In the year 2070, I shouldn't even talk to you people. In the year 2070, none of us are going to be around. All right, two, maybe 1, 2 of you, maybe 3 of you, maybe three people in the rest of the room, and all you guys will all be around in the year 2070. Not the night before Thanksgiving, but in 2070, the day of Thanksgiving, that night is the first candle of Hanukkah. That's the next time that Hanukkah will coincide with Thanksgiving. The next time that Hanukkah will coincide with the first night of Hanukkah, the night before Thanksgiving, and the Thanksgiving day is the actual day of Hanukkah, will happen roughly 4,500 years from now. I have to look up the exact number, but it's about 4,500 years from now, because by then we're going to have shifted the calendar back a couple of days, and the Hebrew calendar, because it's set to do that, I think in about 3,000 years, we're going to have to shift the Hebrew calendar by a couple of days to catch up with the seasons. So about 4,500 years from now, if you guys are still around, you'll know that that Hanukkah and Thanksgiving will be the same day, but in the year 2070, the night of Thanksgiving, so Thanksgiving Day won't be Hanukkah, but at night, like if you're eating your turkey dinner late at night, you can light the Hanukkah candles while your turkey's still on the table, and you'll have another celebration of Thanksgiving like we did in 2013. But Hanukkah will always be between the first night, November 27th at the earliest, December 26th at the latest. So, somebody put a chart while I was researching this, not somebody Jewish, somebody Christian, put up a chart. I don't know why they wanted to know this, but they wanted to know this. How many times over 100 years, I don't know why this is a question, how many times over the last 100 years was the first night of Hanukkah on Christmas? I don't know why anybody wants to know that, but I found a website where they figured out the answer was 4. 4 times in the last 100 years, the first night of Hanukkah was on Christmas Day. So I don't know why somebody wanted to know that, but apparently somebody wanted to know that. So there's your answer. There's no connection between the two things, but they did. But this is our period of when Hanukkah can be. The other cool thing about the calendar with Hanukkah is this. Hanukkah is the only holiday that I know of. I know of no other holiday in any culture anywhere in the world. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means that I don't know about it. I know of no other holiday in any culture or any nation that begins in one month and ends in a different month. Because Hanukkah begins in Kislev and it ends in the Hebrew month of Tevet. So I don't know, if anybody finds one, let me know. But I don't know of any other holiday in any religion or any culture that that's true. That it starts in one month and ends in another month. Someone told me Ramadan, but Ramadan's not a holiday. Ramadan's actually the name of a month. And Ramadan begins in Ramadan and ends in Ramadan because the Muslims do something in the name of the month. So the observance is named after the month that it existed. So it doesn't start in one and end in another. It does on the English calendar, but not on the religious calendar for them. So, Mel. So New Year's Eve, is New Year's Eve really New Year's? Because, but is that part of the holiday, or is New Year's technically January 1st? Right. But is December 31st really part of the holiday? It's not. It's the eve of the holiday. The holiday is actually New Year's, and New Year's is on January 1st, right? New Year doesn't start until the click of midnight, right? Because I thought about that too. I thought maybe that's the deal, and I thought, no, New Year's Eve, we celebrate New Year's Eve, but that's not actually the holiday. The holiday is actually January 1st. It's just one day. So New Year's Eve wouldn't count. Because I thought about it, I'm like, nope, doesn't work. So if anybody comes up with one, let me know if you have it. But as far as I know, I don't know of one, and I've asked this question to several people, and no one's come to me with one. So it might be that that's the case, but maybe one day somebody's going to come to me and say, oh, there's this religious holiday of this particular religion. But I don't know. We'll find out. No. So, speaking of, since we were saying that a Christian website found that Hanukkah began over the last 100 years. The first night was on Christmas 4 times. Of course, we as Jews in America, we get subjected to the idea all of the time. I'm sure most of our students have. I'm sure most of you have gotten subjected to the idea that Hanukkah is the Jewish Christmas, right? Yeah, in our culture, in American culture, we have to put up with this idea that people think that Hanukkah is the Jewish Christmas. Well, one of the things you might not know, well, you probably know the first half of this, but you might not know the second half of this, which is that Hanukkah is not the Jewish Christmas. Niddelnacht is the Jewish Christmas. What is Niddelnacht? Niddelnacht is a little-known Jewish holiday, except in some circles it's a very well-known Jewish holiday. In Chabad, it's a very well-known Jewish holiday. And in other Hasidic areas, it's a very well-known Jewish holiday. Because on Niddelnacht, you read the Toldos Yeshu, the generations of Jesus. We know this book goes back to at least, the origins of this book go back to at least the 4th century CE. And we have printed copies of this that go back to the 9th century CE. And what is Niddelnacht? Well, we have 2 thoughts. Nach in German and in Yiddish means night. And Niddel means, well, in Latin, the word for Christmas is Natalia, which means the birth, right? The birth of Jesus. So Niddel might be a Yiddish play on Natalia, the Latin word for Christmas. But Nitel is also, anybody want to play with some Hebrew word? Nitel, if I take away the nun at the beginning, and I add a yud and a vav at the end, and it becomes talui. Anybody know that Hebrew word? It means to hang. Niddelnach, the night that they hung Jesus. Yeah. And in part of this book was written, the origins of this book go back to the 4th century, the 300s. We have printed copies of this that we believe come from the 9th century, and then beginning in the 14th century, it comes with popularity, and in the 17th century, 18th century, in the 1700s, 18th century, it becomes more popular with the onset of the Hasidic world. And the onset of the Hasidic world, which is happening in Central Europe, and what's going on with the Hasidic world in Central Europe? They're being persecuted by who? The Christians. Because what did we Jews do? We killed Jesus. It's our fault. And Jews are persecuted and Jews are murdered, right? We know this story not to be true, but we know that this is the origins of some of the anti-Semitism that happened in Central Europe. This idea that we, the Jews, killed Jesus when we had nothing to do with the Jesus story at all. Jesus stories aren't part of anything Jewish at all. But the Jews were persecuted. And they said, we need to make sure that we stay away from anything related to this Christian holiday of Christmas, because anything related to that is evil for the Jewish people. Because on Christmas, one of the things that happened throughout many hundreds of years in Europe, Christmas night, Christmas Eve, we have some of the biggest pogroms in the history of Europe. On Christmas Eve, and for those that don't know pogroms, attacks on Jewish villages. We have hundreds of years of history of Christians coming and burning Jewish towns to the ground on Christmas Eve. So Christmas becomes a dangerous night for Jews. So in the Hasidic origins of this Nittelnacht, they started teaching in this book, and the book actually, it's very rude. It makes fun of the whole Jesus story, and it makes fun of the whole Christian story, and everything about Christmas. It makes fun of it. And they study it on that night. And there's certain customs you can't do. You don't leave your house at night. You don't study Talmud or Torah on that night. Because if you do, the Satan, the Satan, the evil spirit, might come into your house, because this is how we might draw the Christians to come burn our village down. And so we don't study Torah and we don't study Talmud to make sure that we're not involved in what's going on that might bring them to us. So no Torah, no Talmud. You study silliness, the Toldos Yashin. No sexual relations, because you might conceive a child who then might be the Satan that will bring evil upon the village. And this became, in the Chabad world, Nittelnacht is a huge thing in the Chabad world and in the Hasidic world now. Very, very big. And you know what the biggest tradition of Nittelnacht is now in modern times? Huh? What? What did you say?
Going out for Chinese food.
No, but if you take those first two letters in Chinese, you got your hint to what it is. And then just add 3 letters to the end of it. Chess. There are Nittelnacht chess tournaments, because chess has nothing to do with the Torah, nothing to do with Talmud, but you have to use your brain to do it. So if you want to make your brain work on that night, to make sure that you're not going to think about Torah or Talmud, because if you just eat some pancakes that night, your brain might float over toward Torah and Talmud, and that would be horrible, because that would bring the evilness toward you. But if instead what you do is you're playing chess, where you have to really think about the game, your mind is so in the chess game that you won't think about Torah and you won't think about Talmud, and therefore you will be safe. And so, no Torah, no Talmud, anything on Nittelnacht, because that's the Jewish Christmas. Denny.
So would they avoid saying prayers? Saying any kind of prayer?
Yes.
Or Baruch Hashem or anything like
Yes.
that?
Yes.
So there's no prayers, they eat without prayer?
So they make sure to eat before the sun goes down, so that you won't say a prayer when it's officially Christmas Eve at night, as if there's like an official start time, right? And then you avoid avoid prayers as much as possible. And if you do say prayers over something you eat or drink, or after you use the bathroom or whatever, you whisper the prayer, so that it won't be heard, so that it'll draw the anti-Semites into your village. So it's a really weird custom, and very popular in Chabad and very popular in the Hasidic world. Really strange custom.
What about in the non-Hasidic but Orthodox world?
Not even thought about.
So even the Satmars or anything like
Well, the Satmar are Hasidim as well, yeah. So all over the Hasidic world, modern Orthodoxy, no. 2 last thoughts in our last few minutes here. Number 8, things you might not know. Do you have a question? Christmas Eve. Always Christmas Eve. Right. Right, whether it's Hanukkah or not. But Hanukkah often coincides with it, so that's the connection to Hanukkah here. Two last things. Number 8, the United States Supreme Court once debated if Hanukkah menorah is a secular or religious object, and they decided in Allegheny County versus the ACLU in 1989, they decided that the answer is yes, it is a religious and a secular object. The case was basically this: in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, on the City Hall steps, there was a creche. You guys, if we can not talk till I'm done, that'd be awesome. Thank you. Okay? So there was a creche. And a creche, for those who don't know, that's the scene of Jesus in the manger being born to Joseph and Mary. Some people filed a case saying that's a religious object, that's straight church and state, you can't do that. In the same city of Pittsburgh, on the next block over, was the courthouse, which was co-owned by the city and the county. And on the steps, there was a Christmas tree and a menorah. The Christmas tree owned by the city, the menorah owned by Chabad, right? And they went to court. The ACLU and 5 complainers went to the court, and they said you cannot have the creche on City Hall, and you cannot have the Christmas tree and the menorah on the steps of the courthouse. And the decision came down in multiple parts, and we can look at the case later, and I'll have Danny explain to me why the Supreme Court does it in multiple parts and all of that, because I wasn't quite clear on that whole thing. But here's what the court decided. They decided that the creche is religious, gotta go. The Christmas tree is not a religious symbol. Yeah, it is. But the Supreme Court decided the Christmas tree is not a religious symbol. It's a symbol of the spirit of the winter holidays. And the menorah, if it's put there by itself, is a religious symbol. And if it's there with a Christmas tree, it is not a religious symbol. Let me say that again, because that totally makes sense. If the menorah is by itself, it is a religious symbol. If it is there with a Christmas tree, it is not a religious symbol, because one of the Supreme Court justices, Sandra Day O'Connor at the time, says if it's with a Christmas tree, it's just in the spirit of the winter holidays. Justice Blackmun also agrees with her. Justice Brennan says no. What it represents, and the exact quote I believe in the writing on the case was, he said, it's the Christmasized version of Judaism. Or the Christianized. If you put a menorah with a Christmas tree and they're not religious, he says no, it's the Christianized version of Hanukkah. That's what it is. If you do that, I think he's right. It turns it into just like another. So they decided. The Supreme Court decided if you have a menorah, that's religious. If you put it next to a Christmas tree, not religious. If you can figure out the logic for that, please let me know, because I have no idea why that makes any sense. But this is what the Supreme Court ruled. So if in your child or grandchildren's school or in your schools, if there's a creche, a scene of Jesus, that's religious and it's not allowed. If there's a Christmas tree in your school, that's allowed, because a Christmas tree is not religious at all. And if there's a menorah in your school, that's religious and it's not okay. But if the menorah is next to a Christmas tree, it's not religious, so it is okay. I don't know. Yes? Because Christmas tree, the origins of Christmas trees coming out of the pagan world, then come, and Martin Luther writes a whole paragraph in one of his books about what each thing on the Christmas tree represents in terms of Christmas. That the tinsel represents the tree represents the cross, the tinsel represents Jesus' tears, the berries that people put on the Christmas tree represent the blood of Jesus from the crucifixion. There's a whole thing that he writes about what the Christmas tree is as a religious symbol. So that's where it comes from. But we've secularized it supposedly and made it into a thing that's not religious, but it definitely has religious connotations. So let me close with, we can talk about that more if you want a little bit, but that's why I say that, because it comes from the yeah, there are, but it's kind of, but it's taken on a secular kind of thing. But let me close. You guys over here, we're going to ask you guys not to talk for another minute or two, okay? Thank you. We're going to close with one last thing you might not know about Hanukkah, the final thing, and I want to close with this idea, which is to experience the real miracle of Hanukkah, look in the mirror. Because the miracle of Hanukkah is not that the Maccabees won the war. The miracle of Hanukkah has nothing to do with a story of oil. The miracle of Hanukkah is that throughout history, you guys, please stop talking. Thank you. The miracle of Hanukkah is that throughout history, there are people who have tried to wipe us off the face of the map, including the Seleucid Greeks. And we fought back sometimes in actual wars and sometimes in philosophy. But the miracle of Hanukkah is in the mirror when you look in the mirror. The miracle of Hanukkah is that after people have tried to wipe us off the map, Hanukkah represents one of those stories that says we still exist. The Egyptians tried to get rid of us. We're here, the Egyptian Empire is not. The Babylonians tried to get rid of us. The Babylonian Empire is gone and we're still here. The Greek Empire and the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire tried to get rid of us. They're all gone and we're still here. The Nazis tried to get rid of us, and other anti-Semitic groups throughout the last 100 years with pogroms, etc., have tried to get rid of us. They're all gone and we're still here. What's the miracle of Hanukkah? Look in the mirror. You and I, we are the miracle of Hanukkah, that the Jewish people, despite all the strife over thousands of years, we still exist. And what do we, the Jewish people, do? We bring light into the world. Despite all of the cultures that tried to bring darkness into the world by destroying us, we rejected the darkness and we decided that we will be the people who bring light. And that's what the lights of Hanukkah really represent. And that's really the miracle of Hanukkah. And that's 9 things you might not know about Hanukkah. 2 last little announcements. Beginning in January, we are bringing back our first and third Saturday of the month Talmud study from 1 to 2 o'clock at the end of our Shabbat services. So please join us for that. And finally, 3 more. They never taught me that in Hebrew school sessions. On January 22nd, Hebrew or English, what is the language of prayer? On March 12th, yes, you can eat rice and corn on Pesach. And on April 30th, what's the deal with kosher wine? So we'll see you for all of those. I hope to do a learning. And I hope there were 9 things that you might not have known about Hanukkah, and you learned a little something today. Thank you, everyone. Happy Hanukkah next Sunday night, 4:30. On Sunday, come join us for festivities. Danny's going to fry 7,000 latkos, or at least a few hundred. And arts and crafts, music, food, all kinds of great stuff at Hanukkah menorahs.